Good morning once again. Welcome to Calvary Baptist Church. Welcome to week 10 of our series, Focus. This is the last one. I know 3 weeks ago I said that we were almost done and we were only going to do like one more. But there's been so much great content in Philippians that we've just continued on with it. So this is our final in the series. And 3 weeks ago I asked this question, why does my life matter? And I told you that my answer is not a healthy answer. The answer that most often comes to me is that my life matters because I work hard and I produce. That I work hard and I produce. And this is problematic because as long as I'm working hard at producing, then I have value. But sometimes I can produce at high levels with little work. And then, well, I'm not working hard, so then I don't have value. Or sometimes I work really, really hard, but it doesn't produce. I fail. And then I feel like a failure, and I feel like I don't have value. And this is like an internal wiring for me. I talked about this 3 weeks ago, and you can go back and listen to that message on our website, cbcfamily.church. It's like forged in the DNA of my family. It's like the source code. It is a source of pride, but it's not a source of life and hope, and it's not from Christ. And at the end of Philippians chapter 4, Paul, he talks about another one of these internal wiring things that we all deal with. And one of the ones that you might have, all of us deal with it at some point or another. So we're going to jump right into it this morning. Philippians chapter 4, verse number 10. In Philippians 4:10, it says, I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now, at length, you have revived your concern for me. You were indeed concerned for me, but you had no opportunity. And Paul is just saying, basically, I'm really happy that you want to help me out, and you didn't have an opportunity to help me until this point, but you do want to help me out, and I thank you that you've helped me out in the past, because this is the Philippian church, and they had helped him out. They had sent him money, they had sent him supplies, they had sent him people to help on his journey, and so he was kind of thanking them for that and calling back to that moment. Then we see verse number 11. He says, almost as an aside, he says, not that I'm speaking of being in need, right? For I've learned in whatsoever situation I am therewith to be content. And he said, I don't want you guys to think that because you were unable to get to me or bring me food or money or clothing or take care of my needs that I wasn't okay. And most of the time we would assume, well, if he's saying not that I speak of being in need, that he must have gotten his needs met in some other way. Maybe someone else fed him, or maybe someone else gave him some money or took care of his physical needs. Maybe you would think that he was provided for, another church gave him supplies, or that he was fed, or that his belly was full, or he didn't miss a meal, that he always had a roof over his head, he had clothing, he had a warm bed. But that's not what he is saying. What he says is this. He says, not that I am speaking of being in need, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. In whatever situation I am to be content. What does content mean? Content is very simply a state of satisfaction. A state of satisfaction. I am fully satisfied. That's what it means to be content, to be fully satisfied. So what would it take for you to be fully satisfied? What milestones would you have to reach in your life? What achievements would you have to have? What would you have to get a certain size house? Would you have to get a certain promotion? Would you have to make a certain amount of money a year? Would you have to go on that vacation that you've been thinking about, or have the marriage ceremony that you've been waiting for, you're saving up for? What is the thing that would have to happen in your life? Or maybe it's a physical achievement. You'd have to hit that time on the marathon, or you'd have to lift X amount of weight. What is the thing that once you hit that, I'll be satisfied? As soon as I get there, maybe it's retirement for you. Maybe it's graduating high school or finishing college. What is the thing that you think, I just need this one thing and then I'll be satisfied? What is the thing that you need that will make you satisfied? Because most of us assume that contentment is a threshold. And what I mean by that is this. On one side, we have need. Think of this as a continuum, right? On one side, we have need, and need is I don't have 2 pennies to rub together, okay? I can't buy anything. I'm hungry. I don't have a roof over my head. I'm in desperation. I don't have the basic necessities of life that I need. And all the way on the other side is abundance. And abundance is, I have more than enough. I have more than enough money and more than enough time. I have more than I know what to do with. I have an overflow. I have an abundance. And we assume that contentment is a fixed threshold. And then we all have the fixed threshold, and maybe yours is a little higher, maybe yours is a little lower, but once I reach this, it's somewhere in between having way more than I could ever need, and between, not having clothing or food. But somewhere in between there is, the mark that you would be satisfied with. Somewhere between a serious need and ridiculous abundance is your contentment threshold. And you might think to yourself, once I can reach that point, then I can settle down. Then I can retire. Then I can enjoy life. But until I get there, I gotta hustle. I gotta work. I gotta put in the time. I need to keep running hard. I really can't be happy until I get to here. Happiness, can happen in this place, but it can't happen here. I gotta keep pushing until I can get there because I don't wanna settle. And nobody wants to settle. And if I said, well, maybe, don't push so hard, you would say, well, I don't want to settle. I want to reach my full potential. I want to push and find out what I can achieve in life. And I think that's okay to want to achieve and want to push and want to grow. And you might think, if I stop before I hit my contentment threshold, then I will forever be unhappy and unfulfilled. If I stop here, then I'll always think, what if, right? What if I would have pushed? What if I would have worked 5 more years? What if I would have worked 10 more years? What if I would have sacrificed, a little bit more time, a little bit, if I'd have pushed a little harder, if I'd have went back to college and done that extra degree or finished that semester or finished that degree, or if I would have just done a little bit more, what could I have accomplished? And perhaps you think your contentment threshold is lower or higher than others. And there's assumptions with these thresholds. A lot of us assume that people who are here aren't working hard enough, right? If you're in need, then you've done something wrong. And we assume that if you're in abundance, then you've done something right. A lot of people assume that if you're in need, then God's not happy with you, like you've messed up, like you've really messed up. And if you're in abundance, well then, God's pretty happy with you and he's blessing you. And that's what people in Bible times believe. But we know that is not the case. It's not the case. To be clear, we do have some control over our need and our abundance. We all have agency, we have responsibility, but there's a lot of things outside of our control. And you might be somewhere in the middle of need and abundance right now, but you're only a car accident away from being in need. You're only a house fire or a tragedy or a diagnosis or a family member's diagnosis could bankrupt your family financially. You're only a downsizing away or an acquisition away from needing a job. I mean, we see with the pandemic how quickly life can flip upside down and dump everything out and change the deal, change the algorithm, change what we thought was working, and need can come to all of us at any time. And it's not necessarily our fault. Sure, there are times when, we were irresponsible, but there's also times where people are in legitimate need because life happens. Life happens. And so whether you're in abundance or whether you're in need, it's not a sign or that God loves you or hates you or that God is blessing you or cursing you. That's not what it is at all. And we need to understand that. For instance, have you noticed that your contentment threshold has moved over the years? Right? Have you noticed that your contentment threshold has moved over the years? Perhaps there was a time in your life when you were happy with a car that barely ran, like a little 1-bedroom apartment and living on ramen noodles and love, just getting by, just making it. And you think back to those times and you're like, we were so happy in those moments. Or when you're in college and you could barely get by and, you're just hanging out with your friends and eating ramen. And it's, or maybe you grew up and you only had like 3 or 4 channels. And then now you like can't live without cable TV, right? Or you were happy with that car that barely ran when you were younger, but now you won't even look at a car unless it has heated seats. And you're like, okay, boomer. Well, what about, you remember when you first started paying for Netflix, and now you can't live without Netflix, Amazon Prime, Hulu, Disney Plus for sure, and I need my Spotify, right? So it's not an age thing. We all fall into this. Like, we all have this thing where it's like, I'll be happy if I have, and then the second you get to the top of the hill, you find out, well, there's another hill that's just a little bit taller, and it's not that far away. Why don't we go to that one too? And your contentment threshold moves. It moves. It moves on us. And the point is that your contentment threshold, your contentment or satisfaction can and does move. So who moves it? How does it move? Does it only move in one direction? And if it only ever moves towards abundance, then will I ever be satisfied? Will we ever reach a place where we say, okay, this is enough. I can now enjoy the life that I have. Will you ever be happy? Will you ever have enough? And you say, yes, Ron, like my contentment's not going to move. I'm going to be happy as soon as I get to the mark there. But that's not our experience. It's just not. And this is what Paul is talking about in Philippians chapter 11. He says, for I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. I have learned in whatever situation I am to be content. So Paul must have had it easy all the time? You think? No. He's actually writing this letter chained to a Roman guard in a Roman prison. He's probably dictating the letter too, because his eyes, many theologians and scholars say his eyes were going bad. He's probably dictating the letter while chained to a Roman guard in a Roman prison, waiting to find out if they're going to kill him or not. And so you see this haggard old man writing, okay, take this down. I've learned in whatever state I am to be content. And I can imagine the Roman guard looking at him like, this is for real? Like, who is it? Who are you? And Paul's saying, I've learned in whatever state I am to be content. Can you imagine? And he goes on. He says this, I know how to be brought low. He says this like it's a skill, like it's an ability, like it's something that he's developed or that God has developed in him. I know how to be brought low. I know how to abound. Like that's a skill. Like I assumed that abounding was just like easy. Like if you had all the stuff, that's a piece of cake. It's not, it's a skill. There's a lot of people who abound, who win the lottery and wreck their lives. In any and every circumstance, I've learned the secret of facing plenty and hunger, abundance and need. Paul talks about this as though these are skills and that there's a secret. There's a secret to being able to move the contentment threshold in your life at will. What if you could move the contentment threshold? Right? This is where you are right now in your COVID-19 situation, whatever that looks like for you and your family. And you're here, and content is here, and this is the milestone, this is the thing, this is the piece that you just need to achieve or get to. And that's your content threshold. And it seems just a little ways off. What if instead of changing your circumstances, you could actually move the content marker to where you are and decide right here, I'm satisfied. I can now enjoy life. I can now be fully satisfied. And there's a secret. Contentment works no matter where you are on the continuum. If you decide to be content no matter where you're at, contentment feels the same. Contentment is not based on actual material possessions or milestones. Those are things that we make up. Contentment feels just as good no matter where you're at. And contentment is fueled by what's on the inside, not what's on the outside. Contentment is fueled by what's inside of me, not what's outside of me. Just like Jesus said last week, that it's not what we put inside of us that defiles us, it's what comes out of us that defiles us. Contentment comes from what's inside of me, not what is outside and around me. And if you feel empty on the inside, then there's nothing on the outside that can fix that emptiness. Nothing at all. There's not one thing on the outside that could fix the emptiness on the inside. Not a job, not a career. There's not a money amount that could fix that emptiness on the inside, because contentment is fueled by what is inside, not outside. And you'll just keep moving your contentment threshold a little more and a little more and a little more. So let's look at Paul's secret to contentment. In verse number 13 here, I believe it's 13. I got the number wrong. He says, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Now, you may have seen this quoted. You may have this on a t-shirt, perhaps like on your team sport, you thought, I can win the track meet through Christ who strengthens me. I could get to the college I want because Christ can strengthen me, or I could find the husband I want, or the wife I want, or I could get the job or the promotion. I could achieve the thing because I have Christ's power. And if I just think it, I can believe it. That's not what this verse is saying at all. It's not what it's saying at all. That's not the context. What he's saying is, because look at the context here. This guy writing in prison, talking about contentment, talking about knowing how to both suffer loss and need and to be in abundance. And he says, what he's saying is, because I have Christ's strength, because Christ is in me, then I can move the contentment threshold to wherever I am right now, because Christ is in me. And I don't have to count on the outside circumstances and things around me. I can be fully satisfied no matter my circumstances, because Christ is in me, who fulfills me, not my circumstances. Christ is in me and he fulfills me. And you might be thinking, how does that work? Why does that seem to work for you but not for me? Like, I've asked Christ into my heart, I've prayed, but I still really struggle with contentment. I still feel like I have these things that I want, and it's just like I'm driven, and I feel antsy, and I have anxiety, and I worry, and why does it not work for me? What am I missing here? What did Paul have that I don't have? What is wrong? Maybe it's worked for you in the past, but it's not working right now. And when I tell you what it is, you might think it's a little weird. When I tell you the thing that you might be missing, you might think it's a little odd. You might think it's a little strange. Or you might say, of course, that totally makes sense because I've done that in the past and I've let that slip in my life. The secret to activating Christ's strength in you to be content in any situation is worship. The secret is worship. Worship. What do you mean? Like singing songs? Well, the definition of worship is this. Worship is to engage ourselves with, dwell upon, and express the greatness, beauty, and goodness of God through the use of words, rituals, and symbols. That's long. Let me say it again. Worship is to engage yourself with the goodness, beauty, and greatness of God. Worship is to dwell upon the greatness, beauty, and goodness of God. Worship is when we express the greatness, beauty, and goodness of God. And we do this through the use of words, rituals, and symbols. And when you engage with, dwell upon, and express the greatness, beauty, and goodness of God, then it fills all of the empty space inside of you. And it moves the contentment threshold. When I do this, I gotta be honest, I'm stressed a lot. I'm stressed when I hear what's going on in church family's life, when I sit with people and I hear the things they're going through, when we have to make decisions as a church dealing with pandemic or finances or lots and lots of things that happen. Just like you have things in your life, I have things in my life, and I've got family situations, and you have family stuff going on, and I get stressed and I get anxious, and it can keep me from sleeping. It can keep me from having peace, and I could think I'm not doing enough or I'm doing too much. And the moments where I can defeat this in my life and I can actually breathe are the moments where I sit on the porch and I put in my headphones and I listen to worship music at night. And I just think about who God is. And I look up at the sky and I think about who he is. How great he is, how beautiful he is, what he's done. Or I'm out on my bike on the Ohiopyle Trail and I see, deer running and the water and the trees, and I think, wow, he created this. And to just contemplate who God is and how great he is and how big he is. When I hold my inadequacies in one hand and God's amazing grace and love in the other hand, and I see that he wants these things to live together. That in the face of my inadequacies, he gives me grace and love. And he doesn't turn away and say, oh, go fix yourself. He says, come as you are. It's in those moments where I think about these things and I think about what Jesus has done for me. I think about how Jesus touched the lepers and how he touched blind people and they received sight. How he fed the 5,000. How he loved the woman caught in adultery. How he turned water into wine. How as he was dying on the cross, he said to the thief, don't worry, you'll be with me in paradise. Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And I think about these things. And I think about how Jesus says he's going to prepare a place for us. And I dwell on these things and I contemplate these things. And it fills my heart with joy. It fills me up with more than I can hold. And it brings me supernatural peace. And that's what worship is. It's not always singing. Yeah, I like to grab my guitar and sing songs. I like to listen to worship music. It's not always singing. Sometimes it's thinking. Sometimes it's reading a psalm. Sometimes it's just time in prayer saying, God, thank you for holding me together. Because it's God that holds you together. And this is what worship is all about. Worship is the secret to enough. Worship is the secret to enough. It fills you with the peace that passes understanding. It empowers you to do what God has called you to do and to be what God has called you to be. And this is the secret that Paul had. There's a story of Paul singing in prison. Singing in prison. And it's that idea of worship that fills us up and helps us to move that contentment threshold. So, we have homework. Number 1, confess your contentment threshold. I want you to think about what is the thing that as soon as I get this, it will make me happy. And what is that? And I want you to just confess that and say, God, this is what I think will make me happy. And just have a sober moment, realizing it probably won't make you happy. It'll make you happy for a little bit, but then it's going to be another thing that you want. Confess that. This is my contentment threshold, God, right now. And then number 2, decide to be content where you are. It doesn't mean that you can't work. It doesn't mean that you can't pursue. It doesn't mean that you can't be creative and build things. I mean, God created us to be creators, and so it's good to work. It's good to push. It's good to try to better yourself. But it's not good to say, I'll start living life when I get there, or I'll be okay when I get there. Instead, contemplate the greatness, beauty, and goodness of God right here where you're at. And I want you to do this week. When you start to feel anxious, then contemplate the greatness, beauty, and goodness of God. And sit and start to think about those things, who God is, and what he has done, and what he wants to do in your life. Let's pray. Dear God, I pray this week that we would contemplate your greatness, beauty, and goodness, that we would allow your presence and how big and how awesome, beautiful, and great you are to fill our hearts, to fill our minds, that we would be content, that we would understand that the secret to contentment is not a business strategy. It's not buying one more thing. It's learning to be filled with your presence, your goodness, your greatness, your beauty. God, I pray that we would slow down, breathe, and listen, and look for you, and allow ourselves to think about who you are, to listen to the worship music, to allow your presence to be in us and with us, so that we would be content, so that we would know the peace that passes understanding. We thank you for Philippians. We thank you that you've showed us what to focus on week after week. We trust you. In Jesus' name, amen. Every week we take an offering. If this is your church, this is your opportunity to give. You can click on the give link there, and if it's in the chat or on our website, cbcfamily.church, you can click give on our homepage. You can also text an amount to 84321, and it will go right there. We also have a church app you can use. Just look up Church Center on iTunes or Android, and then look up Calvary Baptist Church, and you can give through that. Lots of ways to give. Thank you so much for joining us today. If this message has impacted you, then share it. Start a watch party, share it on your Facebook, send someone the YouTube link or our website link, and let them know how they can also have peace the way that you're experiencing peace. I love you. God bless.